Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love the people. And I always start off and say it has not always been like that, okay? I'd like to thank Karen and the committee and Marilyn, which is Karen's sponsor, for inviting me here. You know, what a privilege and an honor it is to get to be able to participate in a program, in a fellowship that absolutely saved my life, you know. You see, I believe people come into Alcoholics Anonymous for a couple reasons and a couple reasons only, and they're for relief or recovery. See, I did not come into a 12-step program of recovery, a spiritual solution for something that I didn't think I had. I just wanted you off my back. I wanted my mom off my back. I wanted the courts off my back. If you just leave me alone, I'll be okay. You know, and I know we got a lot of newcomers here today and a lot of treatment people here today, and I'd like to start off and tell you that you're never going to have a better sobriety date than the one you got. So you might as well keep it. You know, yeah. And you're never going to have the best story in AA, so you might as well keep that one too. Yeah, I didn't hear that when I first came in Alcoholics Anonymous. We learned to share in a general way what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today. We've had some great speakers here this weekend. And we've heard a lot of the program, we've heard a lot of the book, we've heard a lot of the fellowship, we've heard some opinions, and that's what we do. You know, they say there's no teachers in AA, but I think that we're all teachers. Teaching is just one way to impart knowledge of one person into another. And so I think that a lot of you are my teachers. I've had a lot of teachers throughout the years. Some I listened to, some I didn't, to the detriment of my sobriety. I grew up back east. I grew up in Boston. I grew up in the projects. I'm from the streets. I know what it's like to stand in line and get blocks of cheese and powdered milk and hand-me-downs and have the Salvation Army and the Catholic Charities and stuff come and take me and my brothers out and try to get us a Christmas present. You know, I grew up in that world of gimme, 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 take, first come, first serve. Early bird gets the worm. If I don't do it, someone else is going to do it. I'm from North Quincy and South Boston and Southie, and I know we've got some people that are from Boston area. And it was, yeah, there you go. And it was, where I grew up, it was the type of neighborhood where you didn't show feelings and you didn't show emotions, okay? Because if you did, you were weak. And if you were weak, people were going to take advantage of you. So I learned to internalize everything, keep everything inside me. So consequently, as our program talks about in our 12 and 12, defiance became one of my chief character traits. And if you were a teacher or a babysitter or a police officer, you tried to tell Scotty what to do, I rebelled, okay? I came from that alcoholic environment. We have a lot of Al-Anon here. We have Alateen people here. I'd like to welcome you to this wonderful Summerfest where our theme is it works, it really works. Now, I didn't know anything about the disease of alcohol or alcoholism at that time as a young kid growing up, a product of the 60s and the 70s. You know, I really believed if you just leave me alone, I'll be okay. And so internalizing everything and seeing that tornado roaring through the lives of my brothers and my mom, our book specifically talks about the warped lives of blameless wives and children, the sweet relationships that are deadened. The police were always at my house. They were taking my dad away. My mom getting beat up, you know, seeing the bruises and hearing the screams at night. Not understanding really what was going on. I loved my dad, but I didn't like him. And when he drank, he did terrible, seemingly tragic things that our program talks about, and I was never going to be like him. And I started going to a program called Alateen, which is for the children of alcoholics, to learn about this disease. And I would take the trains in the Southie, and I didn't get anything out of Alateen. I honestly didn't get anything out. I didn't want anything out of Alateen. See, Alateen was a place for me to go and manipulate and get you to feel sorry for me and the way I was being raised. That's really what it was about. I started going on Al-Anon with my mom. And now this is 38, 39 years ago. I'm going to Al-Anon meetings, Sacred Heart Church in the basement, and my dad was the type of alcoholic that would follow us to the meetings and sit down the street in his van drinking, okay? And then, yeah, and then I loved it when Bill talked about the clacking, you know, like that, because that's what it was like to me. That was my experience, is they were a bunch of cackling old hens sitting around the table complaining about their husbands, okay? There were no men in Al-Anon at that time. You know, there were no men. There was only 400 groups in all of New England. This is when the second edition of Alcoholics Anonymous was out, okay? And I would go home with my mom, and my dad would proceed to beat her up and call her a whore, and who was she meeting there? And he knew she was meeting somebody there, okay? You know, she wasn't trying to meet anybody. She was just trying to find a better way for herself through the program of Al-Anon, through this disease of alcoholism. You know, around this time, the drinking age was 18, and so I hung around always with older kids. And, you know, I started drinking at a young age. You know, when you're back in an Irish Catholic neighborhood and you're 14 and 13 and 15, you could drink in the pub. If you had the money, you could drink. They would serve you. And so I started drinking at a young age. You know, my story is not the story of drinking out of a brown paper bag at the age of 5. I hear some people that get up and talk like that, and that's not my story. But I drank whenever I could and how often I could get it, and I drank it. And right from the beginning, you know, my experience was that I didn't grow 6 feet tall, my pimples didn't fall off. You hear people saying I could talk to girls. That wasn't my experience. My experience was simply that I could breathe, because I was in a world I didn't belong, you know, and it just made me breathe. It made me fit. I'm that square peg just trying to fit, and it just made me fit in a world I didn't belong. And I had my first arrest, assault and battery on a police officer and drunken disorderly conduct, and I got sentenced to Alcoholics Anonymous at 13 years old, turning 13 years old. You know, and I walked into that young people's group in the Quincy Bay group in North Quincy, Massachusetts, and the youngest young person was like 30, okay? And they talk, and I've heard the comedian last night and Bill, different people talking about that there's a lot of young people, because there were a lot of young people coming back in when the second edition was out too, okay? But see, there's customs all over the country, and I talk about different customs in the country and how things work in AA and the enthusiasms. You know, our book says that outsiders are sometimes shocked when we burst into merriment over seemingly tragic experiences out of our past. But why shouldn't we laugh? We have recovered and been given the power to help others. But see, the enthusiasm in the fellowship is not like that all over the country. See, AA is the same today as it was 75 years ago when we branched off of the Oxford group and started having meetings. The principles, the things that we do, the confession of shortcomings, the leveling of our pride, the stuff that we have to go through, which this process requires for its successful consummation. I'm talking about the program, not the fellowship. It's the same that we do, that they did, so that they could recover from that seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And see, when I went to my first meeting, they interviewed you. And the old-timers would sit you down and interview you to make sure you belonged in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm a kid, and they sat me down. And when I say the old-timers, I'm talking about the guys with like 60 days and 90 days, you know, the guys that knew the program, right? You know, these old-timers, go talk to him, you know. And they basically precluded me from AA. They said I was too young, okay? They said that I couldn't possibly be an alcoholic. I've spilled more than you could have drank. Those things were actually said to me. You know, chapter 3, more about alcoholism, through every form of the self-deception, the experimentation, we try to prove ourselves exceptions to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic. And so I kept going out there defending my right to drink. But see, I had to go because of the court, and I had to get this court card signed for the probation. And so I'm coming in and out of Alcoholics, not understanding what the program was, what the principles were, not understanding that their job in AA was to show me precisely how they recovered. And that the main purpose, that was the main purpose, and the main object was to enable me to find the power that was going to solve my problem. I didn't hear those things. I didn't hear the 12 steps. I didn't hear about the big book. How many people have read the big book here? How many people have ever seen the big book? No, just kidding. Yeah. Now, I'm in AA. I never heard about the big book. I never heard, this is in Boston, okay? Never heard about the big book, never read the steps, never heard about the 12 and 12. I heard things like, just don't drink, go to meetings, okay? Just don't drink, go to meetings. I don't know about you, but that information was killing me, because they believed in commitments there. And commitments are, if you're having a meeting here, another group would come in and lead your meeting, you didn't even get to share at your meeting. You couldn't even share at your meeting unless you had 90 days sober, okay? I had a lot of misinformation on what really Alcoholics Anonymous was and what Alcoholics Anonymous wasn't. I didn't understand that when I put, even at that young age, alcohol in my body, I was gonna try to overcome an obsession that I had absolutely no control over. And that drink was gonna demand another drink. I heard this weekend that my drug of choice was alcohol. But see, I'm an alcoholic. And my book and my program tells me that where alcohol is concerned, I've lost the power of choice. And when I ingest alcohol, I have what's called the phenomenon of craving develop. And I'm going to start making some poor choices. And I've made a lot of poor choices. And I'm coming in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm on Skid Row, and I'm in detoxes at 14 and eating out of dumpsters and trash cans at 16. And I'm entering drug and alcohol rehabilitation programs, the type that shave your head and made you wear dunce caps and sit on the bench and wear signs, okay? And clean dumpsters with those toothbrushes and stuff, and the demoralizing degradation. They called it survival. Out in California, they called it Synanon. I don't know what they called it here. I don't know what they call it in Eugene, Oregon. And you got a wonderful little city here. I really have appreciated Karen and my host, Brendan, taking me around and showing me the city. And what a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I love the enthusiasm of Alcoholics Anonymous. You find these little hamlets all over the country. Okay, but it's not like this everywhere, okay? That enthusiasm. You know, one of the things in the back of the book, in the spiritual appendage, it talks about the principle that's a bar against all information, that's proof against all arguments, that cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance, and that's contempt prior to investigation. That's what the principle is. It's that contempt prior to investigation. See, because I could admit that I was an alcoholic because the court sent me. You know, my mom was on my back. Yeah, I'm an alcoholic, I got a problem. But I never accepted to the innermost self that I really had that problem. And I believe water seeks its own level. I believe that they talked about the steps back then. I believe they talked about the big book then. I believe that that program that I talked about earlier was still the same. But see, I didn't hear it because people can't hear until they can hear, and they can't see until they can see. And I was not looking for a spiritual solution to a soul sickness that I did not think I had. Okay? And so I'm bouncing in and out of these meetings in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm hearing things, but see, now I'm starting to pay the price a little bit more. And now I'm going to DYS, Division of Youth Service. I don't know what it is here in Oregon here. But now I'm starting to pay the price, and I'm starting to alienate everybody away from me, and I'm a blackout drinker. And I'm starting to do those seemingly tragic things that I was never going to do, okay? And I'm coming in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I hear, get a sponsor. Find someone that you can relate to and ask them to be your sponsor. You know, today I understand that I didn't relate to anybody. I mean, think about it. You're a newcomer, you're coming in, green off the street, never been exposed to it, and you're going to relate to one of these guys? I'm so unique and different and alone. This is a disease of loneliness deep down that nothing can touch, and I'm coming in here, and I got to find someone that I can relate to. And so this guy, Fred, this is a true story, a guy's named Fred, he was taking a 4-year anniversary medallion. It's the Quincy Bay group, and how it worked back then is you didn't read portion of chapter 5 from the big book. You didn't read portion of chapter 3. You didn't do any readings. The meeting would start, and the meeting would end with the Lord's Prayer, okay? And how it worked, let's say Harry out there in the audience is my sponsor, and I'm gonna take a 4-year anniversary medallion. Harry would get up here and tell you all about me. And he would tell you about my community involvement in the year. It wasn't just AA, but my community involvement, the things I'm doing, the things that I'm trying to become in Alcoholics Anonymous. And then I would get up and accept the medallion and say a few words. And this guy, Fred, was taking a 4-year anniversary medallion. He was like 30 years old, one of the youngest guys in our group. I'm 16 years old, been in AA a few years now, never read the book, never took the steps, never had a sponsor. And so I'm going to try something different. I'm in another jackpot, and I'm going to find a sponsor. This guy's getting up, and I think maybe this is the guy. And he get up, and I'll never forget it, because he had that medallion, and he says, you know, his sponsor said all this wonderful stuff, and he stood there, and he goes, you know, I was really nervous this morning when I woke up, because I knew I was going to have to get up here in front of all you people. So I smoked a joint to take the edge off, okay? Yeah. And then he went on, and everybody clapped, okay? And I got to tell you, I loved what Fred had to say. That meeting got over, and I went right up to Fred and asked him to be my sponsor, okay? Now, that was my first experience with sponsorship in Alcoholics Anonymous, okay? Remember, our book talks about the man that's properly armed with the facts about himself can easily win the confidence of another, right? And this guy, I asked him to be my sponsor, and I thought, see, you got to understand, this is back a long time ago, okay? And you didn't talk about drugs from the podium, okay? I saw people get pulled off the podium for talking about drugs. That's an outside issue. It's an outside issue, okay? So water seeks its own level, and I'm surrounding myself with people in AA that are on like Darvon, Librium, smoking marijuana, we call it marijuana maintenance, but still claiming sobriety because that's an outside issue, okay? Now, I had never read the book. Now, let me just tell you real quick, okay? Years later, when I say years later, when I finally read the book, when I finally took that prescription that's outlined in the book, Dr. Silkworth closes all those loopholes, okay? When he says that we can't take alcohol in any form, he's talking about that marijuana maintenance. He's talking about a little social heroin. He's talking about these, you know, these things that we do, okay, to get out of here. See, and I didn't understand that. So, you know what happened. I heard a saying that the man takes a drink, the drink takes a drink, and the drink takes the man. And it would just be a matter of time before I drank, okay? And then that drink would take the drink would take me. And the 70s were a lot of problems for me, okay? I ended up getting a girl pregnant. I married her. I do the responsible thing. She came from a rich Irish Catholic family. I came from a poor Irish Catholic family, and I figured I'd settle down and marry her. See, I loved it when Bill talked about the nut ward up here in Salem, because by this time I had already been diagnosed as suicidal, homicidal, manic depressive. I had been strapped to beds, pumped full of lithium, thorazine, chloral hydrate, Haldol, all the wonderful drugs to control me. They were ruling that basically the psychiatrists and so our book says we seldom tell them the truth, right? I never told them the truth. And so they're diagnosing my anger, and if I could just learn to deal with my anger, and they're diagnosing me with all these things. And I got to tell you right now, I was misdiagnosed. What I am is alcoholic. A lot of those behaviors, a lot of those behaviors are common manifestations, okay, of alcoholism. You know, they even say in our book that we're maladjusted to life and full flight from reality and outright mental defectives, okay? And as me and my friend Wayne Butler say, those are some of our finer quality traits, okay? Those are some of our finer quality traits. Now, it does say, too, because I heard that, too, here about being sensitive, okay, that the alcoholic is sensitive. And the book does say that. It really does. It says that the alcoholic is sensitive. But we always miss the next part of it, okay? And the next part of it says, and it takes some of us a long time to overcome this serious handicap, okay? It is my sensitivity dealing with alcoholism and alcohol is a handicap. It's not an asset. And then they list the different types. I heard up here this weekend, I'm a real alcoholic. I heard the different types of alcoholism. You know, I'm a real alcoholic. In our book lists the different types, it says, and then we have the manic depressive type, which is probably the least understood amongst us, of which a whole chapter could be written. And then they didn't write the chapter, okay? That's my chapter. I was telling Karen, I think I'm going to write that chapter, okay? So what I'm telling you is I'm lost, I'm confused, even the people in AA aren't helping me, okay? Bill Wilson talked about alcoholism as a cave, and in that cave of alcoholism are the warped lives of blameless wives and children. It's the jails, it's the institutions, it's the psychiatrists, it's the police, it's the moms coming to the mouth of the cave and they're saying, Scotty, come on out. Come on out, Scotty. And see, they don't understand that I really want to come out. I really want to stop. I just don't know how to stop. You see, and they don't know how to come in and get me. And the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous, the one man talking to another, you know, we're not speakers up here. What we are talkers. There's no lectures to endure, no axes to grind. We're talkers. And we connect, and that's what that magic of Alcoholics Anonymous is, the one alcoholic talking to the other alcoholic. The one that's been properly armed with the facts about themselves. See, I'm not an expert in alcoholism, where it came from, where it's going. I've become pretty well versed at a 12-step program of recovery that helps bring the alcoholic back from the gates of insanity or death through that process that we go through that process of uncovering, discovering, and discarding all the things I thought I knew. But I'm not an expert in alcoholism. You see, and I was absolutely doomed. Our book talks about being doomed unless someone like that appeared in my life. And even in Alcoholics Anonymous, no one like that appeared in my life. And I couldn't get out of this cave, and they couldn't come in to get me. And so we call that a vicious cycle. So I get married, it doesn't work. A couple weeks later, I'm in the combat zone in Boston, and and it's a red light district, and a few of my buddies and I were rolling prostitutes, and if you don't know what that is, it's robbing them. And I got arrested as an adult, and I went into the Charles Street Jail, the oldest jail in New England, 5 tiers, and I walked in like that Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder movie, Stir Crazy. You know, that's right, we bad, and I walked in, and the guy got thrown off the 5th tier, and he got killed right in front of me. And it scared me to death. You know, I had heard all the things that happened to cute little punks in those facilities. I had already been through the Scared Straight program, going in at Walpole prison, Bill Ricka, Bridgewater, all these things where these big tough convicts would come up to me, you know, with tattoos all over them. Give me your shoes. I'm going to bend you over, and they start telling you what they're going to do to you when they get you in there, and try to scare you straight so that you change your behavior. And that you can't scare an alcoholic. I mean, you can't scare. We're smarter than, better than, other than, and we look for the ways in and out and around things. And I became a mule and started smuggling drugs into these guys in these prisons and stuff, and it was all a game to me, you know. And all of a sudden I'm in prison and I'm facing 8 to 10 years, and I'm thinking, you know, this is not good. And this is where our book specifically talks about the jumping off point, that there will be those of us that choose to make the supreme sacrifice and continue the fight. It's talking about suicide. It's talking about not being able to picture life with alcohol or without alcohol. Now, my friend Jim Buckley would always talk about what it was like in San Quentin when the guy was going for the gas chamber and he's going to die and they're going to drop that pill. And he holds his breath, and the pill drops, and he knows that if he opens his mouth and takes that breath, he's going to die. And he knows if he never opens his mouth and takes that breath, he's going to die. That's what alcoholism does to us. You know, and I had reached that jumping off point, and the suicidal thoughts were there. And I ended up getting bailed out, and I went home to my little dingy apartment. And long story, but to make a long story short, I ended up cutting my wrists, got 110 stitches down each arm. I bled out. That's how they found me the next day. And 5 days later, I came to on the critical list in Quincy City Hospital. And you hear people say they can't even do that right. And that's how I felt. I couldn't even do that right. Well, I found myself in another Homes of the Bewildered, strapped to the bed and all that good stuff, getting pumped full of everything. And I ended up beating that case. There was another suicide attempt there. I'm back in Medfield State Hospital. And this woman came to see me. And she told me about this guy named Jesus Christ, that if I accepted him as my personal Savior, that behold, everything would be new. And I don't know about you, but we get really, really good real quick or really, really bad. And I had been bad for a long time. And, you know, I figured why not? Growing up Irish and Catholic, my God was a condemning God that kept a record of everything I ever did. And I was going to be cast into the lake of fire from the first time I touched myself impurely. And yeah, and I did. I had an aunt that was a nun, and you know, I was going to go blind. You hear all these things if you touch yourself, and you know, and I joke sometimes because I wear glasses now, but I stopped in time. No, see, so yeah, there you go, laughter. So I figured, what the hell, why not? And I accepted Christ as my personal Savior, and I went to this program called Teen Challenge, okay? And I quit swearing, smoking, watching TV, listening to rock and roll. I started going to Bible studies, you know, 5-6 hours a day, church 7 days a week. I started traveling in New England, giving my testimony how Christ had saved my life. And I would come into these meeting halls, and born-again Christian meeting halls like this, and they'd be talking in tongues and passing out. And you know, I'm that square peg just trying to fit. You know, our book says we're like actors. We can be more demanding or more gracious, whichever the case may be. I'm still trying to get my way. And see, they had something in their eyes. You know, it's sort of like some of these old timers. They got that shit-eating grin, right? They do. Look at that. Okay. And they got some in the eyes that you want. You don't quite know what it is, but you want it. That's what these Christians had at the time, you know, and I wanted it. I really wanted it, but I couldn't get it. And I'm studying, and I'm not having these experiences that they're having. I'm 3 months into this program. I'm 3 months away from a drink, okay? You know, the way our program is written from the doctor's opinion, about page 63, deal with a couple things, and really only a couple things, and what they are conclusions of the mind, okay? Number one, that I'm alcoholic, my life's unmanageable. I have accepted that to the innermost self. I've come to believe in this power, that this power is going to restore me to sanity. I used to have misconceptions on really what that meant. I used to think that they were talking about the sanity of the world, and really what it's talking about is what Bill touched on last night, is the insanity of that first drink. You know, when this mind convinces this mind that it's okay to drink, that's the insanity that it's talking about. Making the decision to turn my will and my life, which are nothing more than my thoughts and my actions, over to this higher power. What I had never done, though, was a thorough and fearless moral inventory of myself, let alone admit it to another person. I was never going to tell anybody any of these things that I had done. You know, and so I wake up and that moment of clarity, my moment of clarity was, Scotty, you're still full of crap. That was my moment of clarity. You're still full of crap. See, because I'm coming into these rooms and they're passing out and stuff. And so I decided, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass out just like them. I'm going to get filled with the Spirit and I'm going to fall back. And so I did. And I got hurt, okay? I'm getting hurt. Oh, my neck, my back, I'm hurting. So I figured, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm a quick study. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk in tongues, okay? So the next meeting, I would now, mind you, this is real for them, and I want to really make that point. This is a real experience for them. I'm making it up trying to fit. And so I stand there and I start getting filled up with the Spirit, and I start talking in tongues, and Sherry over here starts interpreting what the Spirit's telling her that I'm saying. See, now you got to follow me, because I call this my throne of judgment, okay? Because, see, I'm making it up, and I know I'm full of crap. Now I know she's full of crap, okay? You're all full of crap. This whole thing's full of crap, okay? This is what this mind is doing to me, okay? I'm 3 months away from a drink. I wake up, it's like that cup of coffee right there. You could take that cup of coffee and go put it underneath the sink in the bathroom and drip cool, clear water into it, come back after the meeting, it's still gonna be dark and dirty on the inside. That's what I was dark and dirty on the inside. That stuff that was inside me was like gangrene, and if I didn't get it out, it was gonna kill me. That's the purpose of the 4th step and the 5th step, okay? To get this stuff out. And I went to the director of the program, and he didn't want to hear it, and he started quoting scripture to me. I started quoting scripture back to him, and make that long story short, I told him what he could do with this program, and I walked away from it. And I went back into the same project, same acquaintances, same friends, with the firm conviction, I'm not going to drink anymore. I'm just going to smoke a little weed, okay? Now, I do not talk about that to disrespect the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Trust me, I know the traditions, okay? Our book talks about gin and sedatives. All these things, this is my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous, okay? See, remember my sponsor smoked marijuana. I thought that was okay, and it wasn't, because it was just a matter of time before I drank again. Fast forwarding November 14th, 1979, I tell this story to show the cunning, baffling, and powerfulness of this disease of alcoholism, the insidiousness of it, because I find myself sitting on this bridge called the Bourne Bridge in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Okay, it's 169 feet up. And I had climbed up there, and I was drunk, and I was just going to kill myself and end it all and jump the bridge, and the state police came, and the Corps of Engineer and Coast Guard were down in the canal with spotlights, and the Good Samaritan Suicide Prevention League's talking to me on bullhorns, trying to talk me down, and every time they got close, I'd say, don't do it, I'll jump, and they'd back away. And I was up there 4.5 hours, okay? Yeah. And underneath is this campground called Bourne Scenic Park, and all the campers came out, and they set up lawn chairs and stuff, right? They did. And they're yelling at me, jump, you mother, jump, right? And I'm looking down at these people going, oh, they're crazy. Don't they know if I jump, I'm going to die, right? These are the things in my head. You know, they say that resentment is the #1 offender. Resentment comes from a Latin word, resentare, refeel, rethink, replay. This is what I'm doing in my mind sitting up on this bridge. And I'm thinking all the woulda, coulda, shouldas and the things when I went left and I should have gone right. Norm Alpe used to talk about seconds and inches, okay? He's walking on the sunny side of the street, and when I should have been doing that, I wasn't doing that. And I'm thinking of all these things sitting on this bridge, and you know, I had a lot of good things that were taught to me growing up, good morals, good values, Boy Scout ethics, you know, I joke sometimes, being trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. I still remember that stuff. I got honored by the House of Representatives. I saved a kid when I was 8 years old, and he was drowned and fell through the ice. I had good things that were taught to me, but I'm not thinking about those things, okay? You know, I'm thinking about my dad, and I'm thinking about coming home from school and getting caught sneaking out and having him meet me at the door, and he has a milk jug with the top cut off, and he marches me to his room, and he throws me in. There's a lock on the outside, and the room's so dark I can't see, and I find the light, and I turn it on, and he had sheet metal in my window and riveted it. And he would let me out in the morning to go to school and lock me in at night. Now, they call that child abuse today. Even at that time, though, I didn't think that was child abuse. Yeah, I thought that was just the cost of getting caught sneaking out. That was part of being a hard kid to raise, okay? I had uncles that were police officers and stuff, and they knew what was going on, and those were just the things that happened. That was the price that you paid for getting caught with some of these things. And I'm sitting up there thinking of all this stuff, and I'm just so very, very alone. So that's the best way. They say that the disease of loneliness, I'm just so very alone. And I figured, you know what, I'm just going to kill myself. I'm delusional. I'm thinking of how the West was won and the Indian Sioux Chief and the 200 Braves and Dillinger. I would have been a great gangster and all this stuff. And I decided I had another moment of clarity. Because, see, I had tried AA. I had done Narcotics Anonymous before they even had a basic text. We used the AA book. I'm talking about these drug and alcohol rehabilitation programs they're sending me, and they had a white book, and I've tried psychiatry, and I've tried God, and I've tried this, and I've tried that. And I was born and raised Irish and Catholic, and I had become a born-again Christian, and I had tried the Episcopal Church and Episcopal Young Churchmen, and I'm trying all these things, trying to find God. And so all of a sudden, it's like this moment of clarity was, there has to be something out here for me. There has to be. And this is where the cunning, baffling, and powerfulness of alcoholism took over, because I had another thought, and it was an honest-to-God thought. And the thought that jumped into my head was, you know what, Scotty, if you get down, you're going to look like a pussy to all these people that have waited all this time for you to jump. You got to jump. So I turned and I jumped, okay? I don't remember hitting. It was a long way down. They say I died. The only bone I broke was my sternum cavity, and that was from them giving me the pericardial thumps, bringing me back to life. I found myself in another Homes of the Bewildered. I'm going to fast forward real quick here. I was out, I gave a talk in Middleborough, Massachusetts, which is real close to that bridge, about 8-9 years ago. My mom was still alive, and I had a couple of my brothers there, and I told the story just like I told you. And the meeting got over, and this guy broke through the crowd. And he goes, oh, I owe you an amends, I owe you an amends. And I looked at him, I said, I don't know you, I don't have a clue who you are. He goes, no, you don't understand. We were at the bar in Wareham drinking. He goes, and it came across the scanners that they had a jumper. He goes, so we rolled some weed, we got some Jack Daniels. He goes, that was me yelling at you to jump. He goes, and you did, right? So about 4 years ago, a good friend of mine, Keith Carpenter, okay, he had like 10 years sober, that guy. About 3-4 years ago, I'm giving a talk out in Palm Springs, California. Keith Carpenter had this club called the ABC Club out there. And I was out there with him and Sally, and some of you, Eleanor, may remember Sally. And I tell the story, and I tell that story just like I just did. And that meeting got over, and this real distinguished man in a suit and tie comes up, and he shakes my hand. He goes, I always wonder what happened to you. And I looked at him, and I said, I don't know who you are. He was the state police captain of the barracks there in Buzzards Bay there in the Cape, who called out all the rescue vehicles that actually saved my life. And he was a practicing alcoholic at the time of that, and now he's got like 20 years sober. And it was like, God can do absolutely anything. You had 3 people from different walks of life whose lives were touched back on November 14th, 1979, all sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous, God can do absolutely anything. So I got to go quick here, real quick, because I'm just going to jump through some things. And we tell just in a general way, so we share. Some of you may have heard me give a talk before, and sometimes I touch on things, sometimes I don't. I ended up going in another Homes of the Bewildered. I tried the service, that didn't work. That's another long story. They called me down for the count trainer. I was on the Benninghouse program of alcoholism, taking an abuse every morning in front of the CEO. 4 Article 15s in 6 months. Before that ordeal was over, I'm strapped to the bed at Martin Army Hospital. And I got an honorable discharge. I go to California, the land of golden opportunity, Hollywood, Beverly Hills. As a young kid growing up in the projects, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to be discovered. I'm going to be in the movies. I'm going to be a rock and roll band. I had all these delusions going, and I'm going to Cali. So I get out there on January 9th, and January 16th, I came out of a blackout in LA County Jail. And I heard a saying real quick, and that's that you come on vacation and you leave on probation. Okay? That's what they told me. And the only problem was, before that ordeal was over between LA County, San Bernardino County, and Riverside County, I had 22 years sentencing in the state penitentiary in California, okay? Now this is when Governor Brown was the governor. Some of you may remember Jerry Brown, okay? And I walked into the California penitentiaries, and my attitude was, if you weren't white, you weren't right. I came from one of the most racial capitals of the country at that time, which was Boston. We had forced busing. Judge Sirica would busing blacks into Southie, and we would take the trains in, get up on the buildings, and throw rocks and boulders off at these kids coming in. And now I'm in the California penitentiaries, and I carry that all with me. And those of you that have been in prison know that prison is nothing but a human kennel that breeds violence, and I let it breed the violence in me, and I became an absolute animal. I started getting tattoos all over my body, and I rode really, really hard. And that's just the truth of the matter. I made it up to this institution called Tehachapi in April of 1982. And I got invited to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd been in AA almost 10 years at that time. And I went to the meeting. And I sat in the back with my Bonnaroos on and my bandana, and they started the meeting. They called it H&I, Hospital and Institution, Southern California H&I. And they read a portion of chapter 5 from the big book on how it worked, and I had never heard it. Been in AA over 9 years, never heard how it worked. And I heard it for the first time. Then I heard more about alcoholism, that many of us pursue this into the gates of insanity or death, and they're talking about me. And I'm thinking, where are they getting this stuff? And then this guy, Eddie Miracle, got up and he said, you know, if you're new, you've come home. He said, you need never be alone again. You're like the prodigal son who had to venture out there, and now you're home. He started talking about our glasses as being half empty or half full, that this was a disease of perception. Started talking a lot about this guy named Chuck Chamberlain, and I swear he talked like a country preacher. You know, when he got done, he sat down and they read A Vision for You, where they talk about our book is meant to be suggestive only, that we realize we know only a little, that God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. We need to ask him in our morning meditation what we can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answer will come if your own house is in order. But obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. You know, abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. You know, we shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you'll surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. And they read this, and I'm going, oh, where are they getting this? Oh, that's so good. You know, and I've heard people joke about this, but my real thought was, you know, if you want to hide something from the alcoholic, put it in the book. They'll never find it, right? We never read it, okay? I had never been in AA almost 10 years, never read the book. I jumped into the program like my life depended on it. I started meeting people from Torrance and South Bay, and Bill Honeycutt, old Booger Red, and his brother Frank, and Frank was over in Hawaii at the time, and Rashid, and just all these people that were Jack Prose from LA, the 50-something years sober when he passed, and he started the first meeting up in San Quentin with Duffy. Warden Duffy, and I started meeting a lot of these pillars, and Norm, and Chuck was still alive, and I'm just doing all these things and growing as a person, as a gentleman, you know, and I started realizing when Eddie Miracle, that very first time in H&I, he talked about how we're all children of God, and for me to love you for your color or you not for your color, that there's no room for hypocrites in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Either we're all God's kids or none of us are. What was my choice going to be? You know, and they laid out basically what the program said, okay? And these men were properly armed with the facts as part of our legacies, the service, the recovery, the unity, and carrying the message to people that couldn't get out and get it. And I went back to school, and I was a high school dropout, and I got my GED, and I got 4 years of college behind me. I did a long time. But I utilized that, and I grew, and I got a sponsor, and I got sober, and I paroled. I went through 3 governors, and I ended up paroling, and I went to the Rafters. My home group was the Rafters in Newhall, California. And you know, my mentors were Ted Summers and Phil Stone. And Phil Stone was a direct descendant of Jimmy Burwell down in San Diego, which was part of our Hank Parkhurst, Bill Wilson over in New Jersey. You know, and I started getting these links of different people in the sobriety and pillars of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I grew as a person, and I grew as a man, and I became a product of H&I, and for lack of a better term, I've heard it here today about circuits, or this weekend about being a circuit speaker. I got on the circuit, and I became a circuit speaker, and I started traveling around and speaking at conventions and prisons and doing the deal, sponsoring people. I had a home group. All the things, all the promises started coming true for me. The fear of economic insecurity would leave. We'll know a new freedom and a new happiness. We won't regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. I had worked all 12 steps. Eddie Miracle had moved to Palm Desert. He was out there with Keith, out in that area. And, you know, I was living the dream. And when he moved and he died, and I didn't get another sponsor because I know AA. I don't need a sponsor. I know the program. I know the steps. I'm sponsoring people. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I had an attorney service in Los Angeles, and I'm making my first year I did 17,000, my second year 185, my third year 265. Now I'm climbing up the ladder there, buying a house in Valencia, California, and the wife and a couple kids, and I joined that rock and roll band I always wanted to join. I became a lead singer of a few different bands, and now I'm building homes in Cape Cod, and I'm flying between Massachusetts and LA and getting picked up by limousines and chauffeured wherever I wanted. I mean, this program really worked, okay? You know, for making 20 cents an hour, now I'm making more money than you could shake a stick at, 13 cars, houses on coast to coast, living the dream of Alcoholics Anonymous, okay? Now, my story, though, is not the story of Unhappily Ever After, okay? See, when they say this is a spiritual as well as moral program, okay, I started compromising the principles and the moralities, the things that this program gives us. You know, living that life and being in the industries that I were in, now all of a sudden I'm coming into AA and I'm judging you. See, and I believe you can judge yourself right out of AA, because I'm coming into these meetings and you would talk and I'd say, oh, he's going to say the same stuff. Can't he come up with anything new? Okay. She's a liar. She's cheating on her husband. And I'm doing all this stuff in my head, but I'm not saying that. I'm saying, oh, keep coming back. The program works. And I'm walking out the door. And now I'm judging and I'm criticizing, okay? You know, Bill touched on it when we talk about the steps and the steps 6 and 7. It's only 2 paragraphs, all right, in our big book. And we breeze right through them. And I think they're probably 2 of the least understood steps in our whole program, you know? In our 12 and 12, it talks about the step that separates the men from the boys, the men being the perfect objective, which is of God, and the boys being my objective, okay? And see, now all that selfishness and self-centeredness and self-seeking, all these little things are cropping back in to me, but see, I'm not going to drink. I know the program. I get double-digit sobriety, okay? I'm a circuit speaker. I know I'm not going to drink. You know, and all of a sudden, through a chain of events, through the justification and rationalization that we do with our program, all of a sudden I give the 12th step away. Boom, gone. Having had that spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we try to carry this message. What is this message? This message is a message of hope. It's the message of the promise of the freedom of self, right? I'm not carrying that message. I'm carrying that message of Scotty. Look at me. Look at where I come from. Look at where I am now. Me, 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 me. All right, enough about me. Let's talk about you, Joan. What do you think about me, right? That's what it was like. That's what I'm doing, okay? And I'm not carrying this 12th step anymore. I'm carrying the look at me stuff. And all of a sudden now, I'll give you perfect examples. I'm doing things a married man shouldn't do. I cheated on my wife. All of a sudden, and I remember distinctly, now here's a man of Alcoholics Anonymous, a man that has had the spiritual solution, had the awakening. Oh my God, my spirit, and I'm killing myself. But I'm not telling you, because I'm Mr. AA, okay? And so now I'm coming into these rooms, and now I got secrets. And they say in AA, we only become as sick as our secrets. But see, I'm using the big book because who are you to judge me? The book says God's our judge, right? You can't judge me. I'm not the arbitrator of anyone's sex conduct, right? It's amazing what we can do, what this mind can do when they know the book, just like when we know the Bible, just like when we know spiritual principles. So all of a sudden I give the 11th step back, and just picture in your mind the 12th step. 12th step gone, 11th step, sought through prayer and meditation. We become seekers in these rooms. Bill referred to this as spiritual kindergarten, Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not doing the seeking anymore through the prayer and meditation, okay? I used to have some misconceptions on what meditation was. If you look in some of the old words, they had a great command of the English language back when they wrote this book, and they meant what they said, and they said what they meant. And when meditation back then, one of the meanings that I found was that a general meditates over his battlefield. They had gone through World War II. They were approaching World War I. They were approaching World War II. They understood war. They understood the general meditating over the battlefield. Where do I got to do to get through the day? Where do I got to move my assets, my troops? How do I make it through this day? Our book says, upon awakening, we review the 24 hours. That's what it's talking about, meditation. People go way off streams when we talk about Hare Krishna and all this other stuff, whatever, flowers, and that's great if it works for you. See, I had to get back to the simplicity of it, and it's gone. I'm not seeking through anything. Now I'm not taking inventory. Continue to take inventory. When I'm wrong, promptly admitted it. I would use word semantics like I owe you an amends. Angel, I owe you an amends. And we'd shake hands, and I'd walk away, and I'd say to myself, I owe him it. I ain't giving it to him, right? Little word plays in my mind. Now I owe people a lot of amends. The character defects are in force. I'm giving the steps back one at a time. Now all of a sudden I'm back to that third step, making that decision to turn my will and my life, my thoughts and my actions over to this higher power. It says that the rest of our program depends upon how earnestly we do that. My thoughts and my actions, my will and my life. God is nowhere. My friend Lou Adler said, you know, Scott, it's pretty hard for one God to recognize another God. Whoa, okay, whoa. Says we have no defense against the first drink except in a few rare occasions, okay? Now, when it talks about that, it's talking about willpower. So I believe in Alcoholics Anonymous, you're going one of two ways. You're either going towards a drink or you're going away from a drink. I don't care if you're sitting here, and excuse me, ma'am, with 53 years, or if you're here with 6 days, or whatever you got. I believe you're going one of two ways. You're either going towards a drink or you're going away from a drink. The only absolute thing we can count on is change in these rooms. It's going to get better or worse. Okay, we can hold off through that willpower for a while, but eventually we're going to reach that turning point again, and we're going to have to make the decision. And I reached that turning point in my life with double-digit sobriety, and I felt so bad about myself, and I had such a tremendous ego and arrogance about me. And I drank, and I turned my back on Alcoholics Anonymous. I turned my back on you people, and I walked away from everything, and in short order, I found myself renting this little place in Kingtree and Jackman in Lancaster, California. And I'm doing all those other things through the gin and sedatives. I'm slamming dope again. I'm smoking that rock. I'm looking out the window for those bush people, okay? Coming in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous, wanting to stay sober. A lot of you well-meaning, well-intentioned people, are you done now? You got enough arrows in your ass now? You serious now? Okay. Thanks for doing the research. Some of the sick ones, I sponsored people with 20 years sober. They're coming up to, oh, can I be your sponsor? Oh, that would get me mad. And I would walk out the door and I would get loaded. Okay. And I would come back in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I couldn't get more than, guy raised his hand back there, 12 days. I could not get more than 12 days. I know what it's like to be sitting there right where you are right now. Make a decision. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. And then walk out the door and get loaded anyway. Big Book refers to it as this type of thinking, that when it's fully established in the alcoholic, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid, and that unless locked up, he may die or go permanently insane. That's where I was one more time. That's where I placed myself, through alcoholism. And on Christmas night, 1996, I took a .25 automatic and I shot myself in the head. Boom! And the bullet went in and it blew out the top of my head here. And I came to 3 days later on full life support systems in the Antelope Valley Medical Center. My relationship was so damaged with my wife, there were restraining orders. We were going through a bitter divorce. I had alienated and pushed everyone away from me. And I still drank, even after that. See, any part that leaves out the physical component of alcoholism is incomplete. These are things that the book talks about, not me, and I couldn't get physically sober. And the state of California stepped in to make that long story short, and they pressed charges on me, and they charged me with ex-felon with a gun. They did. State of California. And 13 years ago, this very time, right here, right now, 13 years ago, this very time, right here, right now, I am sitting in Chino State Prison. They're striking me out, giving me 4 strikes. They ruled it was my 4th strike. I had 10 felony convictions. armed robbery with gun allegations with use, and now all of a sudden I have a gun and I shot myself, and so they're striking me out and they're going to give me 25 to life. This very time, 13 years ago, I'm sitting in the hole for 28 days. They say we don't regret the passion, it was to shut the door on it. I was very racial, I was very violent, and I'm in the hole. I got myself in a jackpot, and I'm in the hole. And I knew how hard it was going to be for someone like me with such a tremendous ego and arrogance to come back to Alcoholics Anonymous. Those chips, those medallions, those books, the people, the humility that it was going to take to, like this young girl that raised her hand and stood there that got the book, it was going to kill me. And I got a hold of a piece of paper and a pencil, and I wrote this thing that when one who has wandered far into selfishness and self-centeredness seek to return to the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, he will encounter criticism and distrust. There will be those that whisper, he's a newcomer again, I don't think he'll make it this time either. Now, these wicked ones are doing not the work of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous or of their higher power, but of their own selfish, self-centered interests. They seek to drive the returning member still farther from hope and from sobriety. Let the returning member contemplate the rejoicing in heaven over the return of the one that was lost. Let him in no way be disheartened by the suspicion and scorn of others. He can again walk in the sunlight of the Spirit. Because see, that's what this program was founded off of. You hear love and tolerance is our code, and that's dealing with the 9th step, but that's what our foundations come from. And that's what I felt. It was an honest thought. When I went in there and they're giving me that 25 to life, I had a thought. These honest thoughts that we get, my honest to God thought at that time was, I want to be sober now, okay? I'll work the steps now. I'll get a sponsor now. We get spiritual real quick when we go into jail and treatment and all that, and because we realize what we've done, and my case was no different. Through a chain of events, through God, higher power, Allah, whatever you want to call it, yours, Great Spirit. See, we don't have a monopoly on God here. The spiritual pride that some of us display when you have to do it my way, because my way is the right way if you're going to get this, dealing with religious concepts, kills a lot of us. That's why they were in the wisdom that they had when they talk about the different concepts of Father of Light, Great Spirit, Father who presides over us, God. If you want to call it Jesus or Allah, or you're a Mormon or whatever. I've had the privilege and the honor to be at meetings all over the world, and they're just as sober as I am, okay? And they have a faith and a belief just as much as I do. And really, the Dalai Lama did he was on a symposium down in LA, and they had all these different religious people there talking about the purpose of man, why we're there, the purpose. And they had Catholicism and just all the different people, and they're talking about man and what we do. And the Dalai Lama was the last speaker, and he walked up to the podium, and this has been going on a few hours, and he said, our sole purpose as human beings are to help one another. And then he turned and started walking off the stage, and everybody's looking at him. And he turned and he walked back, and he says, and if you can't help them, don't hurt them. And he walked off. That was his talk right there. Boom. Sole purpose. And if you've read the Bible and Daniel in the lion's den, Peter sitting there and the light coming, the chain falling off, that's basically my story. My wife Kim had started, ex-wife at the time, bitter divorce. Started a letter campaign. People all over the country wrote this Judge Chelsea McKay in the Lancaster Superior Court. And on October 7th, 1997, he took me out of Chino State Prison and he stood me in front of him. And he had the bench full of papers and the gallery full of people, and I had my head shaved and I had that hard look again because prison is a different civilization. It's a different speech, it's a kennel. And now all of a sudden I've got that protection around me through fear is really what it is. And he says, I don't understand this. And he's looking at everything, and he's looking at me. He says, you seem to have helped a lot of people in your life. How could you do this to yourself? See, he didn't understand the disease of alcoholism. Remember that cave I was talking about? We can build this pretty picture to our wives, our employers, our kids, our husbands, that this time's different. Please give me one more chance. I'm gonna change, I'm gonna do good. And then we drink, and we tear the house down. And as our book says, if you usually ask the alcoholic and he's honest about it, we don't know why we do it. But for some reason, God touched him, and he struck 2 of my strikes. He released me the next day, made it my official second strike, and gave me a 5-year tail, 5 years parole. I'm in my 13th year of sobriety now. Yeah. I jumped into AA never with the intention that I was going to be up here, never with the intention to be a talker or speaker again. I just didn't want to drink. I just didn't. I wanted to help another human being to achieve that sobriety. I wanted to carry the message that you too could become whatever you were capable of becoming as long as you were honest and willing enough to try. All my life people told me what a piece of crap I was and what I wouldn't do and what I wouldn't become, and yet you and Alcoholics Anonymous told me what I could do and what I could become if I was willing to put forth the effort and work for it. I reassembled that family. I remarried my wife. We renewed our vows. We've been married 25 years now. Yeah. The 4 kids, I actually 12-stepped her, not 13-step. Okay, let's get that straight. I 12-stepped her into the program. I married her when she had 90 days sober. And yeah, and thank God she stayed sober through all this, through sponsorship, through the program of action that's outlined in our book. I've traveled, we were talking earlier, from Egypt to, some of the stuff I talk about is not to impress you, but to impress upon you that I don't care where you are right now, okay? That God can do absolutely anything. One of the things it says is the fundamental idea of God is deep down in us, okay? That, it may be obscured by the calamity, the pomp, the worship of other things, but it's here and it's only here that he may be found. It was so with us. It talks about us working with others and seeing that light come on. It's surely an experience you won't want to miss. And that's what I do. That's what I do in New York. I was just in Herkimer County Jail Wednesday night. I take a panel in there. My home group is the Central Group in Utica, New York, where we believe in sponsorship. We believe in the program of action that's outlined in the book. Okay? We believe in the traditions. Now, they didn't believe that 8 years ago until I moved there, but no. Angels from New York, that's why I said that. But see, that's what we do, and there's good, strong members there. One of the guys there, Johnny Lanigan, he's coming back after years sober, and through that insanity, through that insidiousness. Now, see, and don't take me wrong here, okay? See, he's doing the deal again, and he's back on the path. But don't take me wrong here. Relapse, going out, getting loaded is not a requirement, okay? This is not, see, I didn't have to get drunk. I want you to understand that. That's why I said that you're never going to have a better sobriety date than the one you got, so you might as well keep it. Okay, and you're never going to have the best story in AA, so you might as well keep that too. I did not have to drink. Had I become honest and willing enough myself through that rigorous self-honesty, see, Dr. T-Bolt, which was a friend of Alcoholics Anonymous many years ago, they were trying to figure out the process that we as alcoholics go through and how this happens. And he had a woman, as a matter of fact, who was one of his patients. She came in the next day and said, I heard it yesterday, I heard it at church. What happens to us? And he said, what's that? And she said, we surrender. And that opened a whole new annal with alcoholism. And he went on to write that when we surrender, our egos get deflated just enough that we can have that psychic change, that spiritual connection, that's sufficient enough for us to recover. And it all deals with the surrender and the ego getting deflated just enough so that we can experience this, okay? And that's why it's important that we know each other, that the eyes are the windows to the soul, and we have friends in AA, and we have a home group, and we have people that we're accountable to, so that we can not be a loner in AA. I was still, even at that time, I was going away from AA, and I became a loner, and I wasn't honest enough within myself to let you know what was really going on. And I did not have to drink. And you don't have to drink, even if you want to. And I want you to hear that, because there's people in here that got time, okay? I don't know who I'm talking to right now, but there's people in here that's got time that are on that cycle and they feel alone. Because that's what we do, is we put our friends and our associates up on pedestals, and we don't realize that they're just alcoholics. My sponsor said to me, Scott, even Jesus took time away from the masses. Like, okay, Ted, thank you. I can talk for hours and hours about Alcoholics Anonymous and the the things. I'm going to share 2 quick experiences because I'm out of time. One I always share because there's a lot of women here and there's a lot of Al-Anon. I was in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and I was at a food pantry, and this woman, she was a white woman. She was taking a 30-year medallion, okay? This was several years ago. And she talked about what it was like growing up in the South. And on their block, they had a mammy. Mammy was a big black woman, okay? And how all the kids in the neighborhood would go and sit on Mammy's lap. And they would rub Mammy's arm. And Mammy would look down at them and say, "Child, child, my skin is as dark as the night, but my soul is as white as snow, just like yours." She's 5 years old, little, she runs away. 50 years later, in the grips of this disease, in A Vision for You, it talks about the terror, the bewilderment, the frustration, and the despair. See, that's when we're coming out of it. That's not when we're in it. That's when we're coming out of it and we're looking at the stuff that we have done, the havoc, that pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. And she's looking at her skin, and she remembered Mammy when she was 5 years old. And in that surrender, she called out to God and she said, my God, my skin is as white as the snow, but my soul is as dark as the night. Help me, Father." And he did. And she had 30 years sober. Those were her words. God does not make too hard of terms on us as long as we become honest and willing enough to try it. You know, St. Francis is credited with saying that we preach the gospel wherever we go. And when necessary, we use words. And I think that's what I've seen this weekend through the speakers, through the committee members, through you of Alcoholics Anonymous here in Eugene, Oregon. I've seen you carry that message. I've seen you use words. And that's what I've tried to do today. And I hope that I have really impressed upon you the seriousness, because underlying it all, this is a deadly disease. It will rob any dream, goal, aspiration you've ever had in your life. Alcoholics Anonymous, through the steps, through the program of action that's outlined in it, will give it back to you. When you get what you want in your struggle for self, and the world makes you king for a day, just go to a mirror and look at yourself and see what that man has to say. For it isn't your father or mother or wife whose judgment upon you must pass. The fellow whose verdict that counts most in your life is the one staring back from the glass. He's a fellow to please, never mind all the rest, for he's with you clear up to the end. And you've passed your most dangerous, difficult test if the man in the glass is your friend. You know, some people may call you a straight shooting chum and call you a wonderful guy, but the man in the glass said you're only a bum if you can't look him straight in the eye. You may fool the whole world down the pathway of life and get pats on your back as you pass, but your final reward will be heartaches and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass. I cheated myself for a long time, both in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't cheat myself anymore. I didn't like my booze watered down. What do I want the program of Alcoholics Anonymous watered down for? This is the real deal, and if you're an alcoholic, I would like to welcome you to Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. If that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.